Good evening. Welcome to the Kelly Wright Show. We're glad that you're here as we embark on yet another journey to provide you with the illuminated truth here on the Black News Channel. You see, together we're all striving for excellence, and our goal is to aim high and be extraordinary. Your top story is coming up in just a moment, but first, some opening observations about the importance of the black and brown vote. No doubt you've noticed that we are in another presidential election season, and many are describing this election as one of the most pivotal and transformative in America's history. And everyone, including the president and candidates, are talking about reaching out to black and brown voters like never before. For instance, we need look no further than the Nevada Democratic presidential debates. The Democrats came out swinging, making sharp and pointed jabs at each other, each of them trying to show their bona fides in being the most connected and electable to black Americans. President Donald Trump is also courting the African American and Hispanic Latino vote. And the great Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., is by far considered America's foremost leader on social and racial justice. So it's important to reflect now on his views on the power of the black vote and the need to mobilize black Americans to vote. And it's still relevant today, his message. In his book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, he stated the following: all of us have our moral convictions and concerns, and so often have problems with power. There is nothing wrong with power if power is used correctly. You see, what happened is that some of our philosophers got off base, and one of the great problems of history is that the concepts of love and power have usually been contrasted as opposites, polar opposites, so that love is identified with a resignation of power and power with a denial of love. Words from Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. from his book, Where Do We Go From Here, in 1967, yet it is still relevant, as I stated. So what do we see in Wednesday night's debate related to what Dr. King was talking about for the candidates and black Americans? Well, all of the candidates, you recall, tried to show they were more connected with the black community. But did they do it in a spirit of love? Which one will emerge as a leader who can really help address the key issues of the black community, like health care, criminal and social justice, and helping the poor living in impoverished urban communities find greater opportunities for better jobs and education? It is time, my friends, for black voters to matter beyond the ballot box. It is time for black voters to demand all candidates show them some love. If you want our vote, then you need to earn our vote. Don't tickle our ears with sweet talk and platitudes. Don't just visit our community centers and churches during the campaign season. No, my friends, it is time that all candidates, including the President of the United States, spend some quality time in our communities. Do the hard work to implement sweeping changes that will improve our communities and the communities of all Americans. Bring true equality for one and for all. Come to our community. The door is open. Knock and you can enter, and get deeply involved with us because we too care about America. Treat us like our vote really matters, because at the end of the day, black lives do matter. And that's my opening remarks. And now, a look at your headlines. The Democratic debate in Las Vegas was a tense affair with all of the candidates taking aim at each other. The 6 remaining candidates didn't pull any punches. Blow after blow was aimed toward former New York Mayor Mike Bloomberg.
In order to beat Donald Trump, we're going to need the largest voter turnout in the history of the United States. Mr. Bloomberg had policies in New York City of stop and frisk, which went after African American and Latino people in an outrageous way. That is not a way you're going to grow voter turnout.
Bloomberg took the opportunity to defend his controversial support for stop and frisk.
I've sat, I've apologized, I've asked for forgiveness, but the bottom line is that we stop too many people, but the policy, we stop too many people, and we've got to make sure that we do something about criminal justice in this country. There is no great answer to a lot of these problems.
But Senator Elizabeth Warren wasn't buying it.
When the mayor says that he apologized, listen very closely to the apology. The language he used is about stop and frisk. It's about how it turned out. Now, this isn't about how it turned out. This is about what it was designed to do to begin with. It targeted communities of color. It targeted black and brown men from the beginning. And if you want to issue a real apology, then the apology has to start with the intent of the plan as it was put together and the willful ignorance day by day by day of admitting what was happening, even as people protested in your own street.
Senator Bernie Sanders took some incoming fire as well. The candidates questioned the motives of his online followers, his personal health, and his health care plan. All of the new national polls show Bernie leading in the race. And not to be left out of the political slugfest, President Donald Trump held a rally in Phoenix, Arizona.
You know, there have never been rallies like that. Sleepy Joe Biden the other day had 68 people. And now they have a new member of the crew, Mini Mike. Mini Mike. No boxes. We call them no boxes. And I hear he's getting pounded tonight. You know, he's in a debate. I hear they're pounding him. He spent $500 million so far, and I think he has 15 points. It just came out. Hey, fake news, how many points does he have right now? 15? They won't tell you the truth.
The Nevada caucus is Saturday, and following that will be the South Carolina primary on the 29th, which will be the first significant primary with a large number of African-American voters. And that's a look at your headlines. We'll be right back after this. Stay with us. Welcome back. The latest debate in Las Vegas, Nevada was full of fireworks. Did you watch it? Our guests Eugene Craig and Steve Held did, and they are here to join me now with their take on what's at stake for all of us on the political campaign trail. Gentlemen, thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Steve, I will start with you. And what did you think of last night's debate?
Well, you know, we were talking about just before we went on. I think Elizabeth Warren made a really strong performance. I think she had a lot of really solid points, but you know, as we were asking, how long is that going to really sustain her in in the 48-hour sort of cycle?
Eugene, just yesterday, you and I were on the set here along with Teresa Lundy, and we predicted that Mike Bloomberg was going to get roughed up. In fact, we called it right, and he did. No sooner than the whole thing started.
The opening line, you know, haymakers were thrown at him. But I have an interesting hot take here. I think Mike won the debate yesterday. And I'll tell you why. He won it with one job: limit destruction, limit the damage. All right. And they literally threw everything at him, which means next time around he's on that stage, everything has less of a sting. But secondly, you know, we're in a 24-hour news cycle, but more importantly, the Nevada caucus is in 48 hours from now. So, you know, whatever happened at the base stage, the effect of it's going to be non and void while Bloomberg still is running ads nationwide. And then, you know, whatever happens in the South Carolina debate next week is essentially going to be null and void as well come next Saturday when the South Carolina primary happens. And then what happens after that? We have Super Tuesday where Bloomberg's probably going to emerge either first or second delegates.
To that point, Steve, will he rebound from what arguably was a weak performance at the debate?
Well, yeah, was it a strong or weak performance? It depends on if just hitting his goal can count as a success or not. Yeah,
Eugene has a unique take on this.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think politics is super complex, so it's very visceral emotionally as much as it's logical, which is why I think Warren isn't really sustaining, because she's very methodical with the way she approaches, but she doesn't have maybe the emotional pull that Bernie has. So as far as Bloomberg, maybe the sting will be taken out over the next few days from these charges. but the feeling still might really linger with voters because there's a lot of resentment, even about the idea of him buying into the campaign in the first place, and then with all we're getting flooded with his messages all over the place. That's maybe a minor annoyance, but it might actually amount to something.
But the other thing is this, right? What he's doing with influencer marketing, was reported he's doing influencer marketing, is no different than what's been done at the door, right? Reaching somebody via social media is probably just as effective as putting boots on the ground, going door to door. Maybe even more effective because you have a much wider direct reach than you probably would at the door. And so he's adapting to modern day marketing strategies. In the 80s, it was door to door salesman, and politics reflected it with going door to door. And 2020 is all digital marketing and influencers and folk that are able to drive message and drive people. And I think every campaign should tap into it.
At the top of the show, I talked about the black vote and the brown vote. Did either of those candidates really show that they deserve the support from the black community?
I mean, black issues didn't really come up that much last night. I mean, I thought it was really rich where most of the candidates on the stage thought it was interesting. They took the opportunity to try to hit Bloomberg on, I guess, on his racial missteps within his track record. But at the end of the day, it comes down to this, right? What are these campaigns doing for Black America? And as it stands right now, from my perspective, Bloomberg has the best plan and nobody has matched it yet.
Steve?
Yeah, well, he's pulling in a lot of his the political currency he's garnered in cities around the country, and so that might take him places. But I think a lot of the criticism around stop and frisk might be strong enough and deep enough that that's still an issue. And
you're predicting it will linger.
He's apologized, but I think with a mistake like that, with the impact of a program like that, apologizing isn't what you do to then get a promotion necessarily. I think it's okay if he wants to atone for it, but that doesn't mean now you get to go ascend as well. So I think those impacts are still going to stick
Gentlemen,
around.
we will leave it there. Thank you for your comments, one
Thanks.
and all.
Thank
Eugene,
you.
always good to see you,
Always.
Steve. Always welcome. All right, and we'll be back with a lot more right after this. Welcome back. Women make up a large portion of the electorate. Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar delivered some of the night's strongest debate performances. Our next guests, Carrie Sheffield and Sharice Crawford, are here to continue this conversation about last night's debate. Welcome to the show, both of you.
Good to be here.
I got to ask you both, as women and watching the candidates perform last night, did any of them impress you about being involved and concerned and compassionate and supportive of women's issues?
Absolutely. Elizabeth Warren stole the night. I've been tracking Elizabeth Warren since the beginning of this process, not just her on-camera presence or the articles that are out there, but her actual voting record. She is a current senator, and her voting record is very impressive. It's real-time information. You can look at where she's taking strong positions before she even showed up to run for office. And so I can appreciate that. And I can appreciate her being strong enough and wearing the pants in last night's debate to have very bold conversations.
Carrie, what about you?
I thought Amy Klobuchar really held her own against some attacks from Pete Buttigieg. Clay Aiken is a friend of mine. We used to co-host a talk show together, and he's come out. He used to endorse Joe Biden. He switched his allegiance and now endorsed Amy Klobuchar, in part because he sees her as more pragmatic. And it's funny because he just thinks Pete Buttigieg has no substance and he's an empty suit. And so it was funny because Amy Klobuchar was channeling, I think, a lot of frustration that people feel about Buttigieg, because Buttigieg, I think, was behaving in a sexist way in terms of trying to diminish her, belittle her, and shut her down and talk over her. And as someone who is often talked over in settings, I thought her zingers right back at him were great. And the thing is, I think as a society, I don't want to divide us by gender. I think that's we are all one human race. But I do think it is very important to understand the dynamics of communication. And I thought that Amy Klobuchar really had a strong night in that respect.
let's go deeper.
Yeah.
What are the issues confronting women in total? Because you raised the issue about sexism, and we do see that in our society today, very sexist, very racist, and we can get beyond that. How do we get beyond that?
Well, sexism is one of them, and education is another. I think that
Good point.
I think Elizabeth Warren has been on the trail for education and education reform and being able to pay for education. And we talked earlier on the show about paying yourself through school, because I think women in particular are more inclined to pay for education, have higher education ratings, and have higher debt because of that. And to Warren's defense is that she's been heavily on the forefront, on the front lines for education reform, as much as she's shown her presence last night on the issue of sexism. I've personally experienced being told at a workplace that if I'm not willing to date X white man, that I need to consider looking for somewhere else for employment.
How did you handle that?
When it's happening, you sort of don't really know that it's happening while it's happening. I got called into a meeting to say, hey, you should strongly consider dating this person. They're a friend of our families. They're really involved with you. And if not, we don't know if we can continue to keep you here. And it was an awakening for sure that not only is sexism real, but that it impacts your livelihood, it impacts your income. I spent some time unemployed because of that. And it marginalizes women completely and then leaves you feeling powerless. And so I think we are reclaiming our power. We're taking our power back, and I think that Elizabeth Warren is the person that's going to get it done.
Carrie, you've been through some personal things as well, and similar to Sharice. Tell us a little bit about yours and why you think that Klobuchar is the answer.
Well, Sharice, I'm really sorry you went through that, and it's. I think the more we can tell our stories openly and not feel like you have to hide in shame, I think that's very powerful. And so I think in that respect, the Me Too movement has been very liberating for a lot of women. I think in some respects it's gone a bit too far in the sense that it's associated with one political party too often, and I think that's unfortunate because a lot of more conservative women want to really, empower women as well. And so I think keeping it in a political movement, that would be my advice.
I thank you both for joining me on this program with some important topical issues, and you went beneath the surface. Sharice, I'm sorry that happened to you, but you're strong, you're resilient, you keep on keeping on.
Absolutely.
And Carrie, all the things that you've been through, you're strong, you keep on keeping on. You've got a new job coming up. You're going to become a White House reporter, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
For a new network that's coming out.
Just the News.
Just the News.
JustTheNews.com.
All right. See, even on the Kelly Wright Show, we even share that. But
Thanks,
anytime
Kelly.
you want to bring some of those reports on the Black News Channel,
I
the
would
Kelly
love
Wright
that.
Show, you're welcome.
Absolutely.
And Sharice, what are you doing now?
Actually, I'm looking into communications directing
Okay.
as well. I've been doing a lot of the strategies behind the scenes, and so I'm still doing political consulting and strategizing, looking to work with Elizabeth Warren, hopefully on this campaign, but definitely open to seeing other options.
Carrie Sheffield, Sharice Crawford, thanks for joining us. You're always welcome on the Kelly Wright Show.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
All
Kelly.
right. And more people are beginning to pay attention to our environment and pollution. Our next guest is on the front lines to protect the planet. Stay with us. Be prepared to learn a lot about the environment from our next guest. You see, protecting the environment is extremely important. Our next guest is the one and only African-American riverkeeper in the world. And he's right here on the Kelly Wright Show. Riverkeepers actually monitor and protect the world's waterways from pollution. Welcome, Fred Tutman. It's good to have you here today.
Thank you.
How did you get into this?
You know, I was a late life law student, and I knew I didn't want to get out of law school and practice law. And then I stumbled across this book, The Riverkeepers, and I basically saw this story, this narrative that was so powerful, so compelling. Citizen activists who were literally fighting incredible odds, and they were winning. They were using the most sparse tools, in canoes and spears and bows and arrows, whatever they took. And I was so excited to see that there was such a movement.
As a riverkeeper, what are your job duties?
So my duties are to build an effective movement to protect a particular watershed. Mine is the Patuxent River, longest and deepest river, stays entirely in Maryland. And historically, the only river in Maryland history to actually get cleaned up, only to see those gains lost again.
Why did that happen, and what can we do to clean up our rivers?
You know, there's a lot of there are a lot of different cuts that go after these rivers. There's runoff, there's direct pollution. The least of what we see people working on is the stuff you can't see: toxins in the water, pathogens, bacteria. My river has 36 wastewater treatment plants. That means a lot of what's in that river didn't start out as natural water, right? So I think we also have this movement in the Chesapeake that's ostensibly guiding the rest of the country, and yet it's kind of lost its momentum. It's become acculturated. We'll be cleaning up the rivers and the bay until the end of time unless we actually stop putting pollution into them. I think a lot of the attention's on doing stuff that treats the pollution rather than stopping or reducing.
I want to talk to you more about how to get more African Americans involved in the environmental sciences. Are you doing anything to reach out and touch the lives of young African Americans so they can say, oh, wow, I'd like to do this too?
Well, the irony of my work is that because African American waterkeepers are scarce, is that to white audiences, there's a presumption that I'm an African American waterkeeper. To black audiences, I'm their riverkeeper because they understand that my perspective actually follows a point of view that fits the African American community. See, I think the absence of people of color in these movements is a boycott. We're not attracted to these movements because we don't have a big enough voice. And they follow issues that are largely formed around affluent, middle-class white donors. So these organizations actually have to learn how to deal with us. As much as they think they have to educate us about the environment, I've never found that to be true. I found a deep passion for the environment everywhere I've gone in black and brown communities. Mind you, the environment is exactly where it is. So it might be in the city. The environment isn't always mountaintops and amber waves of grain. The environment is wherever you are. And I don't think that's necessarily true in white movements where the presumption is the environment is where we hike and we sail and we do all this fun stuff. Right? We have sometimes in black communities a little more adversarial or troublesome relationship with our local environment.
So how do we as black Americans and brown Americans in our communities protect our environment because of the environmental injustices that occur?
We are protecting our environment. Black communities everywhere are fighting, struggling. We have a much harder time finding grants. We compete, frankly, with our white allies and colleagues for those same grants and opportunities. But our environmentalism goes unrecognized because it doesn't always look exactly the same as what these white organizations are doing. So I think people of color have to organize, and we have to insist, and we have to be very discerning about how we ally our voice with environmental movements that reflect our issues and our concerns and our needs in our communities.
Thanks for joining us on the Kelly Wright Show.
Thanks for having me.
You are always welcome here.
Appreciate it.
All right, protect your environment. That's the key. Fred Tutman right there. Stay with us. We're talking about maintaining your money next. That's after the break. Hey, I got a question for you. How's your credit? Because your credit score actually plays more of a role in your life than you may realize. In fact, it affects your ability to obtain credit, loans, and in some cases, even a job. Our next guest, Bruce Evans, AKA the Credit Guru, is here to tell us all about it and how to set the record straight on getting ourselves together with credit. Bruce, thanks for joining us.
Man, first of all, I want to say I'm happy to be here. And you're absolutely right. There is no way you can evade it. There's student loans, if you're getting a financial aid for your kid, college. Even now, even with insurance, car insurance, health insurance, they're looking at your credit score to evaluate if you're a risk or not.
So it's very important then because it affects every aspect of our lives.
You can't get away from it.
Now, in the African American community, are we more responsible for our credit, or are we lacking some things?
Well, we're lacking, first of all, the right information.
Okay.
There's a lot of misinformation that's going on as far as this rush to just alleviate things on our credit instead of building good credit profiles. and a good understanding. I mean, if I had it my way, even from elementary school, there would be some type of education instead of just throwing us out there into an environment where this matters the most.
I couldn't agree with you more. I've always argued, why do our public schools and even private schools fail us? I mean, they educate us in so many disciplines, but they don't teach us finance.
It goes further than that. I have a lot of college kids that are just fresh married. They have on their back college loans, right? And they don't know the least. They can't even name the 3 credit bureaus.
Wow.
I've been doing this for 15 years. So it goes from the elementary, high school, and even college to some degree. They are teaching us financing, but not on a credit level.
So what's your recommendation to those watching us right now? How can they go about getting to those credit bureaus and, one, getting a free credit report, and then once they find something that is wrong or needs to be corrected, what do they do then?
Well, first of all, there are a couple of different options. There's most of my clients, I referred them to Credit Karma, which is actually a monitoring site, but it does give them insight on a score. With me? So freecreditreport.com, you can actually get the items that are on your credit report, but it doesn't really have a score. So a lot of times as a consumer, when we're purchasing a car, we're trying to look for that 680 and above to give us better interest rates. Bottom line is, if you don't, if you're working on your credit, you're trying to actually pay the less amount for your dollar as far as interest rates are concerned. Once you have that obtained, you want to kind of look it over. A lot of people look at old accounts that may have went foul, but you got to look at other things. There are different things that are data-wise that you look for in credit. How many names are in your credit? How many addresses have you lived at? Because it's a computer system, it's an algorithm. So it's gathering data to basically, I guess, gather or not, to see whether or not you're a risk.
He is the credit guru. Thank you, bro. Thanks for joining us on the Kelly Wright Show. We've got a jam-packed show, so stay tuned. More coming up. By now, all of you know that we live in a digital age, and the platform that many people, young and old, use to communicate and express themselves through multimedia. Vanya Pettigrew is here to talk about that. She operates the Root Branch Film Academy in Baltimore, Maryland. She teaches young people how to express themselves artistically through videos, photos, acting, and much, much more. Welcome to the show, Vanya.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tell me about your program, because we live in a society where everything is all about social media, and sometimes a lot of times we often abuse it and misuse it.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. So I am the CEO and founder of Root Branch Productions and Film Academy, based out of Baltimore. We partner with school districts and youth organizations throughout the city and the state as well to teach digital media. We specifically focus on documentary style filmmaking. So this isn't just making videos for video's sake. Our mission is to really give young people voice through digital media.
And in giving young people a voice, how are they using that voice? How are they activating it?
So when we sometimes think about young people, we don't really give them the credit. Sometimes we think we see them on their phones and we see them scrolling and that sort of thing, but they're really very tuned into what's going on in their communities and their neighborhoods and their schools and surrounding. And particularly being in Baltimore, there's so much that is going on, and it really is impacting our young people. So by giving them an outlet and an opportunity to use a platform that they already love using in an entertaining way, to train them in a professional way to kind of really use that platform in a meaningful way to advocate for themselves, to raise their voices and to speak up and speak out about issues that are important to them and their peers.
You're making me think about a time that Baltimore had a wonderful artist named Nina Simone. And out of Baltimore, and this goes to the core of your program, we talked about in that particular song, to be young, gifted, and black. Is that what you're finding in Baltimore? Because the perception around the country, based on some statements that were made from the Oval Office, is that Baltimore is not a good place. And yet, I have a son living in Baltimore.
So that's what this is truly all about. Again, our young people, they are using media, but our goal is to move them from being content consumers to content creators.
And what kind of content are they creating to lift people up and see a different, see Baltimore through a different lens?
See Baltimore through a different lens. So this is an opportunity for them to change the narrative, change the way that they are depicted in the media and by the media, because they're writing the stories. They're telling their stories. They're speaking up and speaking out about the wonderful things that are happening in Baltimore, as well as those things that are not so awesome, but let's talk about it. Let's have healthy conversations around it. And so when it comes from a 10-year-old, you know, speaking out about challenges in their community around violence or the police or homelessness, or it's just whatever it is that they're experiencing, some of the experiences in their schools or the lack of resources in their schools, when you hear it out of a child's mouth, it really, it pushes those that are of authority to take action and make change.
Vanya Pettigrew, that is awesome. Keep on doing what you're doing, because it sure is good, so don't stop doing it.
Thank you so much.
As a matter of fact, you got to make me a promise, or you don't have to promise to me, just do me a favor, bring some of the kids back next time.
Absolutely. They would love it. They would love it. Thank you for the invite. We'll do.
Vanya Pettigrew joining us right here on the Kelly Wright Show. Thanks for being here.
My
It's been a
pleasure.
pleasure. Don't go anywhere. We're coming back with more. Natural, straight, braids, locks, whatever style may suit your fancy, it's important to have it for your identity, your individual identity, that thing that makes you sparkle. An effort is now underway to make sure that Black people, particularly young girls and women, love their hair. Take a look at this video, Embracing Our Hair, from Oscar-winning Matthew Cherry. Our next guest is Ritza Hendricks. She is a creator of Adjust Your Crown, and you have been following Hair Love, and you're making people love their hair right where they are. By the way, your hair looks very nice.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yes, we're really excited about the opportunity to bring this conversation to light this evening, Thursday, February 20th. At WeWork, we partnered with our actual member organization where we have our office space to produce this panel for Black History Month. It started off basically just from a mutual appreciation for our natural hair between myself and one of the coordinators at WeWork, and we would always comment to each other how I like your hair, I like your hair. And in our office, we produce podcasts, we do videos and films and things like that. So I thought, hey, let's talk about it. Let's see if this is a conversation that we can create so that other members within the WeWork space would understand some of the experiences that we have as women of color that decide to rock our natural hair.
Why is it necessary to have a law for Black women to wear their hair any way they want to wear their hair?
I think because often in the workplace, particularly women of color, experience some challenges when it comes to just wanting to go to work and just wear their hair the same way they had it over the weekend. I had a funny story when I was working in corporate America. Went out for the weekend. Here comes Sunday. Usually I would do whatever I had to do so that when I went to work, it wasn't like the natural Ritza. And that particular Sunday, I got home too late, so I just went to work. And on Monday morning, and I just decided to wear my hair the way I was wearing it over the weekend. And I get there, I sit down, good morning to my manager, and she's like, good morning, but didn't necessarily look at me or anything like that. And then she popped up from her cube and she was like, oh, good morning. It was like a whole big to-do.
Because of your hair?
Because I decided to wear my hair natural that day. And I've also had another experience where a VP came down to me and said, you look great, your hair looks great, you don't have to worry about it. But in my mind, I was like, I wasn't really thinking about it. I was just coming to work. So we experience that. We have to think about it before we go on an interview, before we decide to, maybe go to a social event. It's sometimes the one thing that we may have to think about where other people may just decide to do their natural self.
Rich, I want to thank you for making a call to action, because we've even seen young men, young African-American boys who wear dreadlocks or longer hair, and they've had their hair actually cut while competing in a competition or denied from graduating or walking with their graduating class. So you bring the topic to the fore. You keep coming back on, letting us know how it's progressing so that all people can really start rocking their hairstyles.
Thank you.
As I believe, as many people believe, black girls rock.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ritza.
It was an honor.
Back with more after this. Stay with us. My next guest you're going to love, because she talks about the Queen of Soul. Aretha Franklin was a unique and legendary talent known around the world for her powerful singing voice. She passed away in 2018 and we lost a giant, but her memory lives on. Linda Solomon is the author of The Queen Next Door, which takes a look at Aretha's life through pictures and stories. Because you see, Linda is an award-winning photographer in the Michigan Hall of Fame of Journalism. Linda joins me now from Detroit. Detroit is in the house. Linda, good of you to join us today on the Kelly Wright Show. Tell me about your memories of Aretha Franklin.
Well, first of all, Kelly, I'm honored to be with you, and you know how much I admire you. So thank you so very much. And to be able to share stories, oh, they're all true. To share stories about Aretha, our queen, is an honor for me. I met Aretha in 1983. She was just coming home to Detroit, and I arranged to wait outside of a television studio as she arrived, and I introduced myself and I thanked her for coming home. And I asked her if I could take one photograph, and she said yes, and she was so wonderful to me, and she liked the story I did. At that time, I was a columnist with the Detroit News, and she read the story. In fact, she called me and invited me to a private reception, and I met her entire family.
Wow.
And Kelly, it was just always so special to be with her. I mean, she was fun, and she was a friend, and we would talk as girlfriends, and she was so special to me always. And I captured the most intimate moments with her at her Christmas parties, her birthday parties, and no one could host a party like Aretha Franklin. She would start the entertainment with a 30-piece orchestra on her driveway.
Wow.
And she would change the entertainment every 15 minutes, and it was just so exciting to be with her and share those moments. And she wouldn't invite hundreds of people. She would have a party like this with all this great entertainment, Peebo Bryson, Sinbad, for only 40 people. So it was just such an honor for me to be able to capture those moments with her.
And you capture that now, and you've presented in your book, a pictorial, The Queen Next Door. So that's a collection of all the pictures that you've taken over the course of years since 1983 of Aretha?
Yeah. Yes. And the key, because she was so private, And people say to me, what was the key? How did you establish that friendship, that connection? And I'll tell you, it was always including her sisters, her brother. I never once said, Aretha, let me just take a photo of you. I always included her sister Irma, her sister Carol, and her brother Cecil. And I feel that she enjoyed that because I gave her family as much respect as I had given to her.
Sure, that's important. And I think the family respects you as a result of doing that. Aretha is always someone who will be remembered as this legendary voice, but also a champion of civil rights and of hope in America. That's what she'd like to sing about. That's what she'd like to tell us about. And she would make us happy, she would entertain us, but she also inspired us with that amazing story and the music of her Amazing Grace project. Everyone, hands down, remembers that. You had something to do in terms of covering that, did you not?
Yes, I covered the premiere here in Detroit when the beautiful documentary came out. And I was also the family photographer, the personal photographer at Aretha's memorial service. And that was, what can I say? We will never forget her. And you're right, she will always give us hope. She was a champion of civil rights. She was a champion of women's rights. I mean, she helped women as always helping me. She gave me my chance. I was just a young woman when I met her, and she wanted to help me, and she certainly did, as she did with so many women.
Well, presidents loved her, dignitaries loved her, Mandela, Obama, Clinton, the list goes on and on about how many people in nobility, you know, in fact, her music from the streets of Detroit touched nobility, it touched rich, it touched the poor, it touched the black, it touched the white. And Linda, it touched you, and you're sharing your memories, your precious memories. One of her songs that she sang, Precious Memories, How They Linger. I remember her singing that with James Cleveland. So Linda, we thank you for sharing these memories to the world in your wonderful book, The Queen Next Door. And come on this show anytime because you're quite the photographer and you've covered a lot of people, but it's good to know that Aretha was one of your favorites.
Oh, she was my favorite of all time, and she will always be our queen. So thank you for sharing the stories today with me, and I really appreciate it, Kelly.
Linda Solomon, my good buddy. By the way, folks, Linda many years ago said, Kelly, I have a friend, I'd like you to interview her one day. And I said, who's that? Aretha Franklin. I said, oh yeah, right. But Linda, you were telling the truth, as I later found out, and we never got a chance to get with the Queen before she passed, but we are sharing your memories of her and how sweet they are and how precious they are. Thanks again for joining us right here on the show. Linda Solomon. Well, we hope you've been righted and ignited, informed and inspired during today's program. Returning now to another quote from Dr. Martin Luther King's book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? He stated this: what is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. Let that be our aim, our goal, to build a beloved community, realizing we are all interconnected and interrelated. And join me now as I leave you in spreading some love, freedom, and peace. God bless. Peace out.
Well, all right. Come on, y'all. Put your hands together like this. Work with me now. Well, come on. Listen, y'all. Wipe that smile off your face. Come on. Human race. Well. Let the love of God fill your heart. Just let it stay. To yard. Come on. My thing is love. My thing is freedom. My thing is peace, y'all. What's your thing? Love, freedom, and peace. Well, I got to have it. Love, freedom, at least